Hi everyone. The Irish presidential election establishment setup is complete. Only 3 candidates will go forward for the presidential election to be held at the end of October. Now this is a complete and utter establishment stitch-up and a setup, and shows you the real anti-democratic nature of Ireland and Irish politics, where corruption and cronyism rises to the top and provides this illusion of choice. Now, of course, it's quite difficult to get on the ballot for the presidential elections. Back in 1998, there was a cross-party Oireachtas committee that reported to say that it should be made easier, for instance, for people to enter the presidential race. And they pushed forward that perhaps 10,000 people signing the petition would be enough to break from the stranglehold of the establishment politics in Ireland. But of course, that, like many more so-called advances in Ireland in terms of democracy, have been left on the shelf as it has regressed tremendously over the past few years. It currently requires 20 members of the Oireachtas to get on the ballot, and 4 local authorities. Now, a number of people went through the process and 2 came quite close. Gary Sheridan, he had 2 local authorities that supported him, and Maria Steen, who was up until the 11th hour was hopeful of receiving the extra 2 nominations of members of the Oireachtas to reach those 20. And interestingly enough, she didn't receive them, and there was some independent senators also that didn't support Maria Steen. Whether they agree or disagree with her, just in the interest of democracy, to give people a voice, it's critically important that people have that voice. But that is going to be not part of the upcoming presidential election. So this illusion of choice is all you have with this fake opposition and all airing. Plus you have the government parties, and who's going to benefit from this? Of course, the establishment. About people like Jim Gavin, who is the Fianna Fáil candidate, of course a complete puppet for Micheál Martin. Even up to 40% of the Fianna Fáil party didn't support Jim Gavin because this was his own candidate. And I'm sure if this goes to pot for him, he'll be dropped like a hot potato quite rapidly after the election. And much the same as Heather Humphreys, who was the 3rd or 4th choice candidate for Fine Gael after Mairead McGuinness pulled out due to illness, and Sean Kelly was abandoned also, and then there was maybe a couple of more that were looking for that nomination but didn't receive it. And also we have Catherine Connolly, who's supported by the so-called opposition. Now, in fairness to Catherine Connolly, she has stood up for Irish neutrality, but again, she also has recently said that as president she would have to see if any changing towards the triple lock is constitutional, and might have to refer it depending on its constitutionality. Of course, I've spoken in many videos about the lack of constitutionality around the idea of breaking the triple lock. We've seen that through various European treaties, the Seville Declaration and the Nice Treaty as well, which was a critical component of maintaining our neutrality. But of course, this is the choice we're left with. So many people in Ireland feel totally disenfranchised, totally lost with the political system, and they can't blame them because it doesn't represent the needs of ordinary people. We won't be having a proper debate across all topics in society, and this is the fundamental cornerstone of a democracy, where power rests with people. But of course we know it's anything but a democracy here in Ireland. We've sold any sense of our sovereignty out to the European Union, and of course these people, as in the role of president, will be just nothing dogs for the establishment, much the same as Michael D. Higgins has been over the past number of years, in terms of referring, I think, maybe one bill perhaps to the Supreme Court over his 14-year tenure. Of course, he introduced and supported and signed a bill for discrimination in society in terms of vaccination passports. We all remember those, where it was a 2-tier system, a paper system. And of course we can see the European Union and the WEF and the globalists driving towards this paper system as well, in form of digital ID. But also it is very important now to see what people are going to do with this. And let me know your thoughts in the comments to what's been taking place in Ireland. Hopefully more people will be awakened to the sham of democracy in Ireland, to the complete illusion of choice. We've become something like the United States with a two-party system, both served by multimillionaires who serve the interests of Wall Street and don't represent the needs of people. And that's fundamentally where the president's role should be, to represent the people of our country and the citizens of our country. But of course we have more of the same establishment politicians who aren't interested in representing the people of Ireland, who are more interested in just living in a nice big house for 7 years on a big salary and go around and shake everybody's hands and really have no executive powers. But it is important that people represent them in terms of the nation, in terms of our history of our nation, in terms of heritage of our nation, in terms of issues, for instance, around that are important in our society, in terms of our history and in terms of our culture. And we've seen recently people like Maria Steen, for instance, being attacked on RTE when she mentioned about bringing it back to family and having values in society, proper values. But of course, this is what the establishment want to erode. And the commentator, Dave McCulloch, who's now moving into Claire Byrne's slot on RTE Radio 1, said that he wants to bring Ireland back to the 1930s, which is just typical of their nonsense. But of course, in the 1930s in Ireland, to an extent, we built public housing, we built public services for people, and to a massive extent it was a lot better than what we have now in terms of the housing crisis, the homeless disaster, the health chaos. We see it as well with services being diminished under the neoliberal policies of the European Union. But this fundamentally asks a question of democracy and who does it represent. It needs to be taken back by people, and that's what we need to see it. We've ceded so much sovereignty to Europe. 70% of our legislation comes from Brussels, and yet we've even seen a complete and utter stitch-up job with this so-called election. It's really a selection, and really it gives you this illusion of choice. I know many are talking about spoiling their ballots. Many are talking about putting different names on their ballot papers, which you know, this is just the way it plays into the system, plays into the narrative of the system, and it emboldens this rotten, corrupt system that needs to be really dismantled, because it doesn't represent the needs of ordinary people. We need to build up a system that serves the interests of people, where you have all voices of all backgrounds, of all sides of society, to discuss those issues in an open, transparent and honest way, and not something that is just a closed shop. It's going to be a few TV debates, and these illusion of democracy and choice is going to be laid bare for everyone to see. Have this celebrity candidate, the ex-GA manager, Jim Gavin, who wants to dismantle the triple lock. He's just a yes man for the globalists. And then we have Heather Humphreys, well, we know all about her disastrous record in government. And also we see Catherine Connolly, for instance, pushing the corporate climate agenda, and also, you know, issues around gender as well, which isn't seen to understand in terms of the whole issues of what's going on in our society as well. These are massive issues, and pushing this identity politics as well, which have just, it's part of the bigger globalist nonsense in Ireland. Like, and that's the problem that's being pushed down the throats of ordinary people. And we need a radical shift in Ireland. You need a shift to put the needs of people first and keep discussing those issues openly and transparently. And let me know what you think of the setup in the presidential election. And the movement needs to perceive in this. It needs to be led by ordinary people from communities. And that's what's important in Ireland, to build that, to put the needs of our citizens first, and not this nonsense agenda that serves the interests of the super rich, the billionaires, and emboldens this rotten, corrupt system. So, slán go fóill, take care, bye bye.